Hello, my name is Vasily Starastenko. In this case, we will talk about minimum viable product approach to building products as a core foundation of lean methodology. By example of Uber, a multinational company and a leader in transportation services, we will take a look how this company entered the new market for itself, market of food delivery, and how it experimented on different product iterations, and also how it failed with its early iterations and learned from those failures to build a much better, a much more successful product in the marketplace. You will learn several key things in this class. First, you will understand what lean methodology is, what the criteria of viability and minimality of minimum viable product this lean methodology applies. Second, you will be able to understand the assumptions behind the methodology and assumptions when you can call a product minimum and when the product is truly viable, and how those two terms are critical to the definition of an MVP. Next, you will understand the boundaries beyond which lean methodology is not applicable or should not be used. It should be only used in a limited set of circumstances for which it was originally designed. You will also understand alternative methodologies and how to apply them and in which circumstances. And then finally, it's critically important that you understand the feedback loop, build, measure, learn. As a result of this feedback loop, you will be able to always measure the performance of your product in the marketplace, learn from its successes and failures, and keep improving to further accelerate your growth. The company we will be discussing in this case is Uber. Uber is the first entrant, market leader, and innovator in global transportation space, specifically for moving people. The subject of this case is Uber's early attempts to enter a new industry, such as food delivery, which goes well beyond moving people. And the context, it's important for us to understand the context behind this move. Uber is a huge growing company. At the same time, the marketplace is quite competitive and it competes with lots and lots of other companies, and it still fails to make a profit in the marketplace. So for the company to keep growing fast and for the company to be able to have a chance at making profit and to win in this competitive marketplace, it needs to keep satisfying a wider set of consumer needs, and it needs to be able to use its products to use its capabilities for building new products. This way, we can justify why moving people is not enough and why the company does need to consider additional businesses such as delivering food and delivering groceries. The story behind Uber's launch of food delivery service began in 2014 when it launched the first product under the name Uber Fresh. And the product was interesting in that it quite severely limited customer experience. So it was definitely minimal to some degree. It did satisfy the minimum viable product definition, at least on the minimum front. Product only worked with small number of restaurants. It only allowed you to order food within limited hours, so you could not order like 24 hours, 7 days. It only worked between certain hours, for example, between 11 a.m. to 1:30 and then 5:30 to 8, which is very limited, very small fraction of the day. Second, it only allowed you to order very limited products. You could not take a look at the restaurant menu and pick everything for you. In fact, it only allowed you to order things which a driver could pick up from the restaurant in advance and then keep in their bag as they were delivering those orders to multiple people. And that was another substantial limitation. The food you get is quite limited, but also the food you get is not coming to you fresh. Although the name was Uber Fresh, it was coming to you out of a driver's bag. And what ultimately happened is this product has been launched as Uber Eats. It was rebranded from Uber Fresh after the company realized that some additional improvements and modifications to the service are needed. And we're going to discuss those improvements and learnings throughout this case. So the details of Uber's first attempt to launch a food delivery product as a minimum viable product under the name Uber Fresh are as follows. First, the company made it very clear the product is limited and experimental. And in fact, it used the language such as do not expect to order everything on the restaurant menu. Each week, single items from participating restaurants are available, so which tells you as a consumer, this product is very limited. We're not going after satisfying your preferences. We're only giving you an access to like a single, maybe 2 products from a restaurant. We're only gonna give you an ability to order those products within limited hours. Again, there would be a lunch window and a dinner window, and the lunch window would span from 11 to 1, and the dinner window would span from 5:30 p.m. to 8. Which also limits, again, customer experience quite a bit, because you cannot order before 11, you cannot order between 1 and 5, and you cannot order after 8. Those are all, again, compromises Uber has had to make to be able to, again, to deliver a product that's good not for just people who order food, but also for drivers who deliver food. And then the lessons the company has learned. There were some good lessons, that the product was actually viable. But there were some bad lessons, which suggested that although product is viable, it might need changing before it gets viable on a global scale and can grow. The good signs the company got from this launch is that in terms of market traction, it did work for both eaters and drivers. And eaters are those people who order food, and drivers are those people who deliver food, and those are the same people who normally deliver people, who normally move people when there is no food service available. The product was quite successful in those markets where it launched, in a sense that drivers were happy. Many drivers were happy that they don't need to deal with people. And in fact, it was able to generate a whole new set of drivers for Uber, who would never consider working for Uber, and they were able to work as Uber Eats drivers, because also the standards for background checks would be lower, and you're not expected to go through such a number of checks for delivering food as you are for delivering people. So in fact, it was a good product extension for drivers. Many drivers loved it. Many drivers joined Uber just to deliver food, and they would not be able or willing to deliver, move people if not allowed to deliver food. On the customer side, on the eater side, the company had quite a bit of demand, because back in 2014, food delivery was quite uncommon. It was, if not possible, if not impossible, but at least it was very hard to order food. And once you ordered, it would not come to you immediately. So Uber already improved on existing services quite a bit by making delivery much faster and by making it available from the same app where you could book a taxi. So those are the details of what worked really well in the product. The details of what did not go well are available in the interview that Travis Kalanick did on US primetime show with Stephen Colbert. And when I think Colbert asked the Uber CEO Travis Kalanick explain what the customer experience was with Uber Fresh at that time, the exchange did not go well. Because when the CEO explained that not just hours were limited, but the products were also limited, and they had to be delivered to you from a bag in a driver's car, Colbert made lots of fun on Uber CEO, and it kind of got obvious at the time that many consumers have the same concerns, that you want a direct from a restaurant fresh food delivery on full menu, and you don't necessarily want a single item delivery from a driver's bag, which was sitting there for God knows how long, and it might not be fresh anymore and might not be safe. So those are the details of the case. We're going to continue discussing the learnings. So the problems Uber is solving by launching Uber Eats are multiple. First, there are some general problems that the company is facing to stay competitive and successful in the global marketplace. The key problem is getting to profitability. The company is still not profitable, it consumed tens of billions of investor funds, and it needs to start showing profitability at some point to get investor confidence. Second, to get to profitability and to get to this global competitiveness, the company has to constantly improve its product line and constantly expand the product line to keep making more money from existing customers and to generate new customers. Finally, there is a severe international and US competition in normal products for moving people that the company is facing. So while launching those new products, the company still needs to stay on top of its main revenue generating product lines such as moving people, and those are all important problems. On top of the main problems, there is some pandemic-induced troubles that Uber has to be addressing. First, as a result of the global pandemic, the demand for core services went down. So it was impossible to put multiple people in a car for the social distancing constraints, and also the confidence in the product went down for both drivers and riders. Drivers would expose themselves to much higher health risks by putting multiple passengers in their cars over the course of the day, and that was not an attractive value proposition for them to get sick with COVID for the Uber money that they can make. Riders also got stuck in their homes due to social distancing and due to some limitations on their mobility. But even if allowed to travel, they chose not to, or they preferred driving in cases when they previously would prefer Uber. So the global pandemic has created quite bad consequences for Uber main business overall. Those are the main problems and limitations Uber was facing. So there are multiple limitations the company has to deal with to succeed in the marketplace for food delivery. Some of those limitations are imposed by its main business, and some of the limitations are imposed by the realities of the marketplace for food delivery. The limitations caused by its main business are as follows. Drivers need to be able to earn a living, and they need to be able to move people. As a result, their availability for moving food and delivering food will be limited, but also the prices that the company has to charge for those food deliveries will also be limited. In a sense, it needs to be a relatively expensive food, and they must be able to charge you for the delivery to pay for the driver time. Those are all significant limitations. On the customer demand side, the limitations the company is dealing with are also quite serious. Not all food can be delivered to people instantly. And also not all food can be delivered to people in a way that they're going to enjoy it and in a safe manner. For example, ice cream, there is a risk that ice cream just perishes while you're trying to deliver it. So the limitations on the demand side, the sample limitations we considered in an MVP case included limited time. The company only delivered during a limited lunch window from 11 to 1. And dinner window between 5:30 p.m. and 8. The limitations on restaurant choice side included that only limited restaurants could participate in this offer. And the limitations on items selection were as such that only limited items from a restaurant menu could be selected. Finally, in addition to all of those limitations, another limitation is that the food would have to spend some time in the driver's box before delivered to you. It was not coming to you directly from a restaurant. So those are the main limitations that Uber's customers are facing with the Uber MVP for food delivery. So the goals for Uber as a company are different as described by its previous CEO and the founder, Travis Kalanick, and its existing CEO, Dara. Specifically, the goals as Travis had in mind for Uber was transportation as reliable as running water everywhere for everyone. And the goals, as they're set by the current CEO, is one app that users can access in one click and that has all the possible things that Uber needs, that Uber customer needs. Think of it as a one-click gateway. That's the vision for the company and the goal right now. As we talk about the company goals when it launches food delivery product, again, there are financial goals and succeeding in marketplace goals, such as company needs to make it profit, company needs to make it easier for drivers to join and start making money, and as we discussed, driving to deliver food has low bar and is not as strict for background checks and can allow more people drive for Uber and make money. Also, it allows the company to attract new customers who usually don't need to take rides for themselves, but they still need to get food pretty much on a daily basis. So each of those goals are important for the company to be competitive and successful in the global marketplace. Beyond the company level goals, there is obviously customer level and product success goals. So the product needs to be successful enough to make drivers able to make a living out of it, and to make customers happy enough to keep ordering on a day-to-day basis. So what it means for drivers is the product needs to be able to generate enough revenue for drivers to still be profitable for Uber and make sense for drivers to drive for Uber Eats or Uber Fresh. And then on the customer side, the product needs to be good enough so that it can be competitive as compared to going to a restaurant or cooking for yourself or not ordering food. Like those are all multiple alternatives that you have while ordering Uber Eats or Uber Fresh. And the goal of the company is to build a product and the customer experience which is better than each of those three alternatives. Either ordering in a different restaurant, or cooking your own food, or choosing to not eat any food. So those are the main goals the company has as it relates to its products. So the specific actions Uber has taken to deliver and improve on MVP are as follows. First, it assembled a high-powered team representing all major functions needed to develop a good product. The team consisted of a product manager, a set of engineers, designers, data scientists, and research. So this powerful group of 5 functions is what's usually needed to build really awesome experiences, and Uber as a large successful company was able to afford staffing such a high-powered team. Next, it did product evaluation on a day-to-day basis, and it measured customer satisfaction with product along multiple dimensions. One sample dimension would be Net Promoter Score, NPS. The NPS shows you how likely the customers are to recommend your product or service to their friends. And it basically looks into who are the people who really like your product and willing to talk about it, similar to how we described in Airbnb case of customers loving you and talking about you all the time. And it looks into the number of people who on the opposite don't like product at all, and they will definitely not be talking about it with their friends in a positive light. Next, the important action Uber took is they were honest to themselves in evaluating the product performance and the customer feedback. For example, the feedback it's taken from the marketplace pointed to some success, but also pointed to some warning signs on future customer traction, which is represented in this interview that CEO Kalanick had with Colbert. So as a result of this honest approach to feedback, the company has decided to make changes to the product before going big and launched a completely new iteration of Uber Eats, which allowed real-time delivery from restaurants from a full menu. So that was a result of the honest approach to the problems. The actions the company is taking is ready to make transformative changes, not just small changes to a product, right? When the feedback suggests that it's not enough to just change delivery window from 11 to 1, I don't know, to 10 to 2, the company is willing to make changes much bigger than that, right? So if large change is needed to satisfy the customers, the action Uber takes is to make this change. This is important. And then finally, continuous experimentation and continuously improving the product and continuously collecting feedback from the marketplace is an evidence of this build, measure, learn loop that Uber was successful in implementing in this case. It definitely built a product that was somewhat successful in the marketplace. It measured the performance of the product, which included a tough feedback the CEO received during the interview. That was all part of the measurement. And then it did some changes to that product, which resulted in a completely new brand name and a completely revamped product offering that it launched. So those are the main action the company has taken. There are several key insights in this case that I want you to take away. And first, we'll start with insights which overall made Uber a successful company and made Uber Eats product a success. Those include, first, change the world type of attitude, where you're launching the product with the vision of making it useful to the whole world. You're not just launching it as a small use case in one city for one small group of people. So the attitude of changing the world and doing big things is quite important in this case. Second, it's an idea of continuous learning. So Uber was quite successful by learning from its products, iterating on the product based on those learnings, and making painful decisions such as discontinuing the early, less successful version. Next, fast iteration is the key. When the learning happens consistently, being able to iterate on those learnings fast to learn even more is critical for success, and Uber was good at doing that. And then finally, the brutal honesty that we discussed. When the evidence is mixed, The product has both positive and negative feedback from the marketplace. It's too easy for the company and the team that built the product to say, you know, things are actually going well. You know, some people don't like it, but vast majority do love it, so we should just keep going with existing product. So this inertia and this friction to prevent the change is too high, and the brutal honesty was there in this case. The company did understand the product was not good enough for becoming globally scalable product, and it did make painful changes to the product. So to summarize, some insights of what went well in this case and what was good. The entry was early. The company was one of the first to do with food delivery, and that was definitely good. There was less companies to compete with. And then it did have solid early traction on both sides of this double-sided marketplace. Drivers loved it. Lots of new drivers came to drive for Uber just to deliver food because background checks were not as strict as delivering people. And then eaters, who are usually riders with Uber, loved it as well because the demand for the product was quite substantial. So the product was quite popular early on. At the same time, some bads, like things that did not go well, is the possibility of the poor future product market fit as the company scales and the product keeps growing, was highlighted in this primetime interview that Uber CEO had with Colbert. It's never cool to be made fun of during the primetime interview, so it makes you think about whether the product is the right one. Then some signs of trouble coming in directly from riders, like from eaters and drivers, when eaters do not like the fact that food gets only delivered during lunch windows, and the stuff gets discussed in forums. And on driver side, it does create problems with demand, that you can only work between 11 and 1 if you drive for food delivery, and then you cannot work before 11 or after 1. So that all creates problems that the company needs to think about. And then also some bads, like the fine-grained analysis that the company could do on the product performance could have suggested some of the feedback that the CEO got from Colbert, even in the company's own data. So the fact that it got such a harsh feedback from the external customer suggests that maybe some of the data was either not instrumented appropriately or maybe not acted upon. So those are the things that could have been improved. And finally, bad understanding of what customers really want. Launching the product with limited windows for delivery, limited items, and storing those items in a box, arguably you could have understood that customers don't really want that if you have done a good enough analysis. So those are the things we could consider as insights of what has not gone well with this case. There are quite a number of learnings from this case I would like you to take away. The first one is understanding the lean methodology and minimum viable products, what they are. And in this case of Uber, we understood that the product market fit matters a lot. Although in startup cases, the early product market fit matters even more. In some cases, when you're limited with time and money, it's critical for you to use your limited resources to get to as much learnings as you can early on and to get to this early traction early without luxury of additional time and resources. The case of Uber is great because it showed you what happens after you, like, let's just not call it fail, but not fully succeed. It shows you that, yes, you can still take time and effort and reformulate the product and launch it as successful. So it does not mean that single failure will result in a double failure. In fact, being able to learn and make changes makes you much stronger. However, the lesson for you is if in a startup, the luxury of multiple iterations may not come available. So it's really important for you to understand what customers want. It's really important to try to launch this minimum viable product in a way that has at least some traction with customers to then be able to learn from it and then improve the product from there. Second, understanding of lean methodology and criteria of minimality. The product has to be both minimum and viable in a sense that you don't overinvest, you don't build too much, you only build just enough to satisfy the customer need. At the same time, what viable means is a tricky definition. So viable on the one hand means that some customers like it. And Uber product, Uber Fresh, the early iteration of Uber Eats, does satisfy this requirement. So it was viable in a sense that customers did like it and used it. However, as you apply the definition of minimum viable product, can this product be viable at 10 times the scale, 100 times the scale? So the answer changes in that case. Although product was definitely viable, it was good for hundreds of thousands of customers, probably millions, it was definitely not good for billions. So in that case, it's important for you to distinguish between what viable means for today's customer audience and what viable means for tomorrow or intended customer audience. Next, it is important to understand the difference between boundaries when lean methodology is applicable and not applicable. Specifically, lean works really well when you have limited time and money, you're limited in your resources, you're a startup founder or an early employee in a startup. This methodology works just great. It's used by many incubators. It's a way that startups are now accelerating the development and getting early tractions in the market. But it does not work in cases when the money and time are less limited. An example could be with large corporations where cost of mistakes of not delighting your customers is too high. And in fact, the company would prefer to take more money and more time to build the right product instead of the fast, minimum viable product. So knowing this, you will understand the boundaries in which the concept of MVP or minimum viable product is useful and less useful. And then finally, the last learning I want you to take of this class is the importance of the feedback loop, build, measure, learn. As it's evidenced in Uber case, the company had a mix of positive and negative data, and it's usually too hard, too easy to dismiss the negative data and just say that positive is what matters. And in fact, we may just not need those customers who told us bad feedback. We can build a great company with positives. But in case with Uber, you learn that it takes brutal honesty and it takes being able to experiment and step back and analyze the data to decide that in fact, the mixed evidence in this case justifies pretty substantial changes to the product and pretty substantial changes to the way it's consumed by customers. So with all those learnings, I hope you will have success in your startup ventures and you'll be able to build successful minimum viable products in a lean way.